Welcome to the McGregor Dementia Support Ministry Podcast. This episode is a breakout session from our February 21st, 2026 seminar titled, We Are Here to Help, How Can You Best Serve Caregivers? Presented by David and Tamar Miller. Caregivers often carry a tremendous responsibility. This session explores how churches, friends, and family members can come alongside them in a meaningful and practical way.
My name is David Miller, and I am the pastor of membership and missions here at McGregor. I know many of you. And my wife and I moved down here to Southwest Florida 23 years ago. And we have two boys. And we cared for my dad the last 4.5 years of his life. He moved down here, lived just a bit down from us on the same street, and the last 3 of those years he lived with dementia, and so we were both caregivers for him. And this is my bride of 29 years.
9 years, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm grateful to be able to serve in our women's ministry. Is where I get to hang out with ladies and talk about a lot of different things. I do actually also work part-time at the school that's here, so that's in and of itself a unique thing. But this is our son. Carson, can you wave?
Just wave to everybody, buddy.
Yeah, this is our son. He lives with autism, so we are now his adult caregivers for him. So autism sometimes mimics a little bit of a journey with dementia, so this is always just really helpful for us. Our oldest, though, is in college, so praise God, he is supposed to be graduating Mother's Day weekend. Not a better way to celebrate getting him off our payroll than that. So.
Well, he'll be back.
Yes, he'll be back. They always come back. No, but today actually is special for us because today marks the third year anniversary of the passing of David's dad. And he was a part of this church family, and we're grateful for the time that we had with him.
And we're very thankful that y'all are here in our breakout today. Much of this seminar today is geared toward helping the person with dementia. Our breakout session is a little bit different because our breakout session is about helping the person who is the caregiver of the person who has dementia. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And that is fulfilling the role of encouragement, ministering to that caregiver, and there are those who are primary caregivers, and there are those who are secondary caregivers.
And there is a difference between the two. Like for us, like we talked about, we really, those first 3 years that we were caregivers of Troy, he lived in a house that was just a few doors down from us. And he might have some medical teams come and visit him, but in those last 8 months, we did move him to an assisted living. Therefore, we became the secondary caretakers for him in that situation.
So our overall purpose in this session today is to train and equip you. You being the person who wants to minister to and care for the caregiver. And so that's our goal. And
So we're going to start off with just a couple questions that we want you to answer out loud because it will help you begin to process how you might think a caregiver needs help. So my first question is, put yourself in the position of a caregiver. What do you think they might need from a person who desires to minister to them? What do you think they would need, the caregiver?
Someone to listen to them.
Okay. Good.
Stay with them. Stay with the person that has dementia so they can go do something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pray for them.
Yeah.
Good.
Cook and clean.
Yeah.
Connect them with resources.
Cook
He
and
said
clean.
cook and clean. Come back to you.
Connect them with resources, help them find
Yeah.
information.
Absolutely.
As far as you said, secondary caregiving is huge. As I shared, we have good friends that the husband is starting to get advanced, and the frustrations for his spouse are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very normal in that scenario.
just to listen.
Phone calls. Phone calls.
There you go.
That's important.
Good. What, in responding to someone who's a caregiver who is caring for someone with dementia, what might be a helpful response? Because we'll get to the unhelpful in a second, but for now, what might be a helpful response from you to them that might be an encouragement to them?
Probably real similar to what you all talked about, but being more specific.
Yeah,
If you've been through it, you can say, I understand.
absolutely.
That's what you did.
Yes. Praise God.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've been through it, that's right.
You've been through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Just to let you, I hear you.
All right,
Yeah.
good.
I think the secondary is really important, because we live it, giving the caregiver a break.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that what they're going through is hard,
Validate her.
Yeah,
not minimizing.
not minimizing, that's good.
So think a different way. What might be an unhelpful response that may hinder a caregiver? I'm not saying we have any personal examples or anything, but
Telling them what to do.
yeah,
Telling them what to
yeah,
do.
Okay.
Breaking in and saying, oh, well, you should hear what I'm going
yeah,
through.
yeah,
Just not
Yes, very unhelpful.
yourself there instead of letting them.
yeah,
Good. That's very unhelpful.
Get over it.
Yeah,
yeah,
Just trust in them.
yes, there are some platitudes that are unhelpful sometimes. Come on in, Miss Sue. No, you're
Okay,
fine.
go ahead and grab a piece.
Get your hand out. Get your hand out.
Get your hand out. Your hand out, yeah.
I thought you said stick your hand.
Well, you can do that too. The Bible is not silent on the issue of caregiving and the caregiving role and how to serve a caregiver. In John 19, which you've got on your handout there, Jesus does something very interesting. He assigns the care of his own mother, if you know the story, to who? That's right, to the Apostle John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. So we pick up in verse 25 as this moment happens. And Jesus is on the cross, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, that's John, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. So this gives you an interesting glimpse of a moment that happens between Jesus, John, and his mom. And to be clear, the Bible doesn't say that Jesus' mother had dementia. That's not the point of saying this. But as we discover in the gospel accounts, prior to this, Joseph has already passed away. And with Joseph passing away as the oldest son, Jesus would be assigned the responsibility to take care of his mother as in the caregiving role. So as Jesus is dying on the cross for the sins of all who will trust in him, what happens is Jesus appoints John here to care for his mother. And that's no small thing. But if you notice, John did not volunteer for this. Jesus assigned this role to John, and John submitted to Jesus' assignment. This is very, very similar to when a caregiver of someone that has dementia steps into the role for a very first time. And when I noticed that my dad was exhibiting signs of memory struggles early on, the Lord never consulted me or asked me if I wanted to do this. And he doesn't have to, because he's the Lord. He just assigned me the role of being my dad's caregiver, and I could fight that or I could submit to it. Maybe like some of you, or even some of the caregivers you know, I was reluctant at first, But the longer I was in that role, the more the more at peace I became with it, I guess is the best way to put it. So, and this is what happens with John. John's given a brand new ministry here, an additional responsibility to what John already had going on in his life is being given with, and he's never consulted about this. And again, if you have a relationship with a caregiver, it's important that you understand how that unfolds so you can rightly minister to them. It's not a role that they volunteered for. In fact, we see this play out in a little bit more detail in Acts chapter 1, which is that next passage that's on your handout. And in Acts chapter 1, that's where John is mentioned, still responsible for Jesus' mother. And yet it's clear that John has help and support from the community that he's in. Look at it with me, beginning in verse 12. Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away. And when they had entered, they went up to the upper room where they were staying, Peter and John, and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas the son of James. All these with one accord were devoting themselves to prayer together with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. So the beautiful picture even of the early proto-church, if you will, because the church isn't born until Acts chapter 2, and this is still Acts chapter 1, is you've got a community of people that are going to help support John as John takes on the responsibility of caring for Jesus' ministry. So one person might be primarily responsible for the one who has dementia, but it takes others to come alongside the caregiver to provide support for them, which is where you come in as the one ministering to the caregiver. And notice that there are a couple of things that jump out here that are already going on in Acts chapter 1, prayer and fellowship. And if there's nothing else that you take away from today, those are two things that must be present in the role of one who is caring for the caregiver. And y'all mentioned it, sitting and talking with someone, praying for someone, praying with them. Prayer and fellowship are critical for this role of caring for the caregiver.
And so in our situation, as we've mentioned, David was primarily responsible for his father-in-law's care. He was the power of attorney. He was given all of these different pieces that were a part of that. Even though he had other siblings, they lived in other states. And so it was going to be noticeable that I would be encouraging him as he's caring for his dad, because again, I had Carson I was caring for and some other things. But this also meant, as the Lord kind of led us through this journey, that I was assigned also some ways to help Troy. I ended up taking over all of his finances, writing the bills. I kept him involved, but when he'd start getting stressed about it, it would be, it's okay, we paid that already, because he just couldn't process the way the bills were handling, and I would have to hide his checkbook and things, because he'd start writing checks for who knows what. But it also might meant that I'd come over and I would help him do some laundry. Again, not to take over because he wanted to be self-sufficient, but was to say, let me just help you clean that up real quick. You're having a little trouble walking or whatever, we'll do this and we'll just visit. Let's just visit. And we would find a way to visit. And so Troy moving to Southwest Florida for the last 4 years of his life, and the last 3 of those battled dementia, it was just clear from the beginning that I was going to be heavily involved. It's kind of like, it was like David's been assigned, but it doesn't mean somehow I'm not assigned. Why? Because we're married and we're one, and I also love that man like he was my own father, and I wanted to take care of him. The great thing about what God did is Troy agreed to move out here on his own. It's hard to get them to move when they need help. But he thought we needed help, which was great.
Oh, he wasn't wrong. We did need help.
We needed a lot of help. I usually talk to him about how much I was struggling with it, And so he felt like he came out with purpose, which was great. But in the end, it was us that helped serve him. Yeah. And so that's also how I care for my husband and my household, but it was also involved assisting with his dad.
So today we're going to look at 4 components of serving the caregiver well. And we are going to take questions at the end, hopefully, as time allows. So the first component is you as the one caring for the caregiver, you understanding the challenge for the caregiver. And what's often missed is that the caregiver needs to be cared for, and that simply just gets overlooked in a lot of situations. Not only by others, but also by the caregiver themselves. I remember times where my life, my week, my day was insane because I was constantly going, trying to think through all the things that needed to be done for my dad. And many caregivers are not sure how to be helped. And I think that is the case because they feel overwhelmed, they feel isolated, they might even be hesitant in asking for help. That's true with a lot of men, and it was true for me. So my last 2 years of caring for my dad were very intense, and I didn't realize how intense it was at the time until he passed away. I didn't realize how overwhelmed I was until he passed away. And as I look back on it, I felt like I had 2 full-time jobs, one here as a pastor at McGregor and one caring for my dad. And I think that's the reality of most caregivers. And so when he died, I felt guilty for several reasons, but one of them is that there felt like there was this relief or this weight that was lifted off of me because I'd been carrying that burden. So the challenge for the caregiver does not cease when the person that they are caring for dies. That does actually continue.
So our Alzheimer ministry actually took a survey of about 27 caregivers that had been connected to this particular conference, and that included us. We took the survey as well, and we were asked several specific questions about our experience in this role. And so we're going to be sharing information that I think will be very helpful to you from that survey that's pertinent to this particular breakout session. And just to give a little background, the survey participants provided care for their loved one anywhere from 6 months to 17 years. And 2 specific questions that caregivers were asked on the survey were, how have others served you well as caregiver on your caregiving journey? And then 2, how could others serve you better in the future, or how could they have served you better in the past?
So that leads us to the second component of serving the caregiver. It's not only to understand the challenge, because think about 17 years. That person that was participating in our survey, that's a life cycle of an adult. That's moving from birth into almost emerging adult. And we've got 2 of those in our life. So that's a long time. So that challenge of caregiving is a heavy burden, but it's also important for you and I to be informed of the concerns of the caregiver. And that's the second thing on your outline. One of the other questions that was asked on the survey was, what tip, wisdom, or knowledge would you give as the caregiver want to share with someone who's just beginning the caregiving journey? So as a caregiver, what tip, wisdom, or knowledge would you want to give them as they start off? So the answers to this question show us the concerns of the caregiver, because as they started out on their journey, many of them felt panicked, they felt overwhelmed, they felt very uncertain of the future. Most of them felt ill-equipped, like I'm not ready for this, I don't know how to do this. They felt alone in bearing responsibility. We saw loneliness in a lot of the answers, alone in bearing the responsibility for giving the care, but also just lonely because they didn't know how to connect to other people that were doing the same thing, which is one of the blessings of being a part of this church, is that there are many that are doing that. And I understand the feeling of being ill-equipped and lonely. I'm the third in the birth order of my family, so I'm carefree number 3, and I love my brother and sister, but they're very serious, very not grim, that's not the word I'm looking for, but I can't think of the word that I'm...
very type A.
Very responsible, yes, both very responsible people. And
Yeah.
I wasn't. So I was thinking, Lord, why have you given me this assignment? Why didn't you give them that assignment? And so, but it was to me that God gave that assignment. And when that becomes evident that your loved one is exhibiting the signs of dementia, much less even getting an official diagnosis like we eventually got with that, you become the caregiver even though you feel unprepared for the task at hand, and even though you're unsure of what you're supposed to do. Yeah, Richard?
You may journey upon it, but the question is, you as a caregiver, how that impacts your relationship as husband and wife.
Yeah, we will get to that. Yes, sir. We will get to that. Great question. And so in terms of being uncertain about the future, which is, again, a reoccurring feeling that caregivers have, there's so many decisions that have to be made by the caregiver just kind of starting the caregiving journey, such as, do we do facility care or do we do home care, or what are the real daily needs of this person who has lived on their own for, their whole life, basically, and just basic information about how to help their loved one. So repeatedly in the survey, we heard the same theme, articulated in different ways, but it was like, I feel like I'm flying blind. So as the person who wants to minister to the caregiver, that's the sense that they have. That's one of the concerns that they have. And so this issue behind all of these concerns really goes to the issue of reliable wisdom. Like we talked about earlier, who can I trust and what can I trust? What wisdom can I trust in how I care for the person that has been entrusted to me. So
what's fascinating with our example, just of having a son who's 20 now, we've been on the autism journey, is actually a lot of the patience has already been built up for caring for someone whose brain doesn't work quite like you think it should. And so we had a point where we just thought, really, God? We're already overwhelmed with this side of autism, and now we're going to do this. But actually, it was just the two of them together, Troy and Carson, really were just such a blessing to us, because they weren't necessarily the ones having a hard time with their diagnosis like we were. And so I remember even when we were first diagnosed, he didn't get his official diagnosis till he was 5, but at 2 we knew we were dealing with this. And so you get overwhelmed with, and don't ever go start Googling things, because you'll be stuck in some overwhelming piece, but you're like resources and suggestions, early intervention, ideas, recommendations, how to care for this child, and all of that has big dollar signs attached to it. And you're like, okay, God, are you going to make us independently rich all of a sudden on a pastor's salary? Or what are we supposed to do? And so we got really overwhelmed with just the wise decision making, because in our mind, everybody's saying, you should do this doctor, this. And there was just a point when you make decisions, first of all, by going to the Word of God, and you're like, God, autism is not in the Bible, but hey, disability is, and parenting and discipling and all of these different things. We're like, we're going to have to trust you. Duh. We're going to have to trust you in something that is unfamiliar to us, that we weren't prepared for, that we felt like we weren't. And actually, maybe that's the whole point, is because you're depending on God for providing resources. And I think that's part of the wisdom, is resources are needed, but you're fighting with so many places with resources because of the sheer amount of people that need help, including with kids with autism or with dementia. And so it was tough to rely on the Lord at times, but we thought, you know what, God? You're giving us wisdom, but we also have to entrust some of those resources to other people, whether it be, a facility, a care, home health, whatever it is. And we have found out that God has truly been faithful to us. He continues to be, as we explore new stages with Carson, and even with his dad, there were times where I was like, God, you just put that in place, and there's no way around that. We were fighting against this or that, and you just provided. And that's where I think to see and be grateful for the way that God provides. And so now that you understand the Caregivers Challenge, we're going to move through these quickly, more aware of their concerns. This really leads us to really sometimes this crisis of the caregiver. Caregiving can be frustrating, as we've talked about, because in most cases, the question that's lurking in the background is, why is this happening? Which is often a good question to ask. But sometimes it can almost be more inwardly fleshed out, because you're like, no, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to our loved one? And it's hard because you know that God's a good God. You know that He loves you. He's cared for you and all of these things. But it begins to kind of go, wait a minute. This is so much bigger than I probably want it to be. This is like long term for a little bit. There's not an end in sight right now. And that's when I remember, again, we'll just tell stories about us, when it became a kind of a concept of this crisis that we were going to be facing, is when David and I together decided about 5 years ago that I would accept a part-time job at our school. We had prayed for a part-time job because we were about to have a student in college, and we did not want to go into debt. trying to put him through college up in Orlando. And so we had prayed for a part-time job, and he provided at the very place that I've been a part of volunteering at the school. Great. And we were so happy. But the very day I started my job, something happened with Troy. He had a blackout, and he fell, and he couldn't find his phone, and he couldn't get up, and he was sitting for hours on the floor before we realized what happened. And I remember going, I shouldn't have taken this job. Did I misunderstand? And you're just constantly going, what am I supposed to do with that? I remember just crying on my first day of my job because David's like, tomorrow I haven't heard from my dad, because he would check on him constantly, because again, he was still living in his house. He lived just a few doors down. And when I was a homemaker, David would be like, hey, I can't find Dad. We had keys. I'd just get in. I'd go. This was a day that couldn't happen. And David figured out, and he rushed over, and he figured out what had happened. And his dad was bleeding, so he didn't know if he bonked his head and all of these things. But what it did is it really hit a point of this crisis of faith going, we don't know what we're supposed to do. We've got these conflict of interest almost our household with our kids and trying to make ends meet. And we've got Dad over here that he has growing needs. What do we do? And this brings us really to the heart of the matter, which is God's sovereignty in human suffering.
Because we believe that the Bible teaches that God is sovereign over all things. We believe that every concern and every issue that comes about in the caregiving journey is ultimately orchestrated by God, and ultimately God uses that to cause us to trust in Him all the more. I firmly believe that is one of the primary things that God does with human relationships, is that He puts us in relationship with other people in order to cause us to trust in Him more. Paul talks about this in Ephesians 5, where he talks about the sanctifying role of marriage. We've been married 29 years, and I walk closer with Jesus because I'm married to her. That's not a knock on her. That's God's use of her in my life. And the same thing is true for her. And so what God does in human relationships, even in the caregiving journey, is He accomplishes this. He causes us to trust Him all the more. You've got Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 on your handout there, where God Himself speaks through the prophet Isaiah. And He says this, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Well, that's a powerful statement, friends, which has huge implications if you think about it, because that means there's an intentional gap between how God thinks and how David Miller thinks. And that gap is there by design because, well, He's infinite and all-knowing, and I'm finite and not all-knowing. I'm not omniscient like He is. And so I'm limited in my understanding. And so there's a gap between those two things. And that gap, again, is intentionally designed by a loving Father that we might trust Him all the more. So we have two boys, and our oldest, who is neurotypical, he's now 22, right? Mm-hmm. And he's in his final semester of college, as we mentioned. And we've been having conversations with him all of his life. He's been a challenge to raise. Amazing kid, but a lot of conversations when he was growing up, he didn't understand our position as parents. He didn't understand why we were asking him to do what we were asking him to do. And that's not because he's a dumb kid, he's a bright boy, but it's because he's not a parent. So he doesn't have the authority that we have as parents or the responsibilities we have as parents, and he doesn't have the perspective that we have as parents. Friends, in a very similar way, this is how we relate to God. We don't understand some of the things that we're going through sometimes because He's sovereign and we're not. He's infinite and we're finite. And so we have to trust His higher ways. We have to trust His thoughts as we walk the road of dementia and as we care for someone who has dementia or we care for the caregiver. So the real question that we have to ask is, can I trust God when I don't fully understand what's going on? And the helpful two verses for that is Proverbs 3, 6, and 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. When I was caring for my dad, God had to show me over and over and over again when I was not trusting Him for my dad's future. My dad has a creator, right? And it wasn't me. It didn't have to be me. He has a caretaker, one that loves him way more than I love him, and I loved him a lot. And that caretaker, the Lord, that creator, the Lord, is sovereign over every neuron in his brain that was working well in that moment and that was not working well in that moment. And that's how far the extent of the sovereignty of God is. So I had to learn to trust in God's sovereignty. One of the other survey questions that was asked of caregivers was, how has your faith impacted your dementia caregiving journey? And we love that question because we can look back on it now and see that it did impact our faith. But when you're in it, it's not that way. And so your role as one who cares for the caregiver is to encourage them in that, to see farther down the road that God's doing a bigger thing than actually what they're focused on right then and there in that moment. So trusting God for the outcomes that we have to deal with, while at the same time caring for a person in a situation that we don't fully understand, is quite the challenge. And of course, our tendency as fallen sinners is that we can easily think it all depends upon us.
We saw this perspective a lot in the survey answers provided by caregivers. Several responses mention that the caregiving journey gets more difficult as time goes on. It's not something like the autism journey with our son. We figured some things out. Life settles into normal, and he's still progressing. He's still learning. He's still growing. Dementia is regressive, and it does get harder and harder. And one of the unique difficulties of caring for a loved one with dementia is that you are grieving a loss akin to a death, but the person is still living. Yeah. Especially if they don't know you. We were grateful, and praise God, Troy always knew us till the day he died. He knew his grandsons till the day he died. There might have been a lot of other things he didn't remember, and he told stories over and over, but he always remembered us, and we counted that as a blessing. But at the same time, we had a sadness about us each time because we could recognize his struggle in trying to figure out why he was where he was and all of that. It's interesting, we have a couple in our church who recently found out that their unborn child due in July has high probability of being born with Down syndrome. We've been ministering to them. And when a parent receives a diagnosis of their loved one, it's like dementia. You grieve a death that has occurred because it's not that the afflicted person has died, but it's the dream of the ideal that's died. And frankly, people look at you with pity as if you've been given a death sentence or you're caring for that. And instead of, I always wondered if someone could just say, congratulations, the Lord has selected you favored people to care for a son with autism. This is the greatest blessing you will ever have because of what he will teach you about your relationship with Jesus. But unfortunately, that's not how it was permitted to us. But for us, that's what God has taught us about that, even though we struggle sometimes with. Keeping in mind that to care for a caregiver, they are dealing with very real grief, but they almost have a guilt because, again, the person is sitting there. They're still there and all that. In contrast to some other responses mentioned within the survey that presents crisis moments for caregivers, that the first year or two after diagnosis is the hardest. And for the sake of time, we're not going to give you we're going to not read all of this because you heard actually a testimony of the gentleman that said those first 2 years were difficult. It was the transition years. Yeah. He was learning how to go, okay, I've got to recognize this decline, she's recognizing the decline, and we've got to start looking things differently. And so that beginning year or two can be the hardest, and there's many responses that were offered within the survey about how to care for your loved one and still manage your own life, your household, marriage, personal self-care, and all of that.
So now that we've sort of talked about the challenge, the concerns, and the crisis of the caregiver, let's think about constructive help to the caregiver. The most common piece of advice that is mentioned by caregivers on the survey that we took is that you cannot do this alone. And so you being the one ministering to the caregiver already is part of the solution of them trying to do that alone. So don't minimize that, because your role is incredibly important. And it can't be done alone. It shouldn't be done alone. And so sometimes in life we think we are helping, but we really aren't helping. And that's sort of the being there, being present, being the one who is caring for the caregiver, but yet not actually hindering the goal of ministering to them. So a helpful suggestion would be in terms of first contact with the caregiver themselves. And we saw these on the survey questions. So asking a question like, how can I help you? And be specific. Make offers such as, can I pray with you? Can I visit your loved one? Can I meet a financial need? Can I make a meal? Can I mow your yard? Can I drive your loved one, like the suggestion was made earlier,
Yeah.
drive your loved one somewhere to their appointment? Or can I stay with your loved one so you can go to your doctor's appointment? And because if you ask the average question of, is there anything I can do? The person's gonna normally say no, right? But if you give them, if you're asking questions to give them examples, they can make the evaluation in the moment and say, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yes, my yard does need to be mowed. That would be a real blessing to me. But if you just ask, is there anything I can do? Typically they're gonna say no. So when members of my dad's life group would stop by and visit with him, that was such a blessing to me. Again, it's a 24/7 job. Even if you have another job, caregiving is a 24/7 job. And if I knew when a person from his life group was stopping in to check on him, that was a day where I didn't have to check on him. So that's another example of one of those suggestions. So you also have some, right?
Yeah, so there's two very helpful questions on the survey too. We'll kind of keep moving on that may be able to give you some concrete suggestions. And again, that was, how has the church served you well, and how could the church serve you better? The most repeated response, and I believe it was mentioned here on the survey, was just frequent verbal encouragement to the caregiver, a note card, notes, text messages, calls, and it not be like a one-time thing. It's like, hey, I'm calling every Tuesday, and or I know you're going to be at the doctor's office right now we're going through a couple that's dealing with cancer, and we know every Friday they have this treatment, and so we reach out to them. Again, it's important to also just not say, hey, I'm praying for your dementia husband, wife, parent, whatever. It's, how can I pray for you specifically as the caregiver? What are you dealing with? And again, this is part of relationship. I'm not going to tell a stranger, honestly, I'm not going to let a stranger take my son somewhere. You better have a relationship with us. But someone that's been, again, that's why life group's important. On the survey, caregivers, again, y'all were right on. You answered a lot of these questions already. They needed quality resources. They needed recommendations to help them learn about dementia, those next steps. Sometimes we're just like, I just need a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just tell me what to do next, and then I'll just do it. They also needed to find legal advice, which we're offering today, medical equipment, financial help, things that didn't constantly cost.
I had never bought a mobility scooter before in my life. Until I started caring for my dad.
And then we actually donated it to someone that could use it, and because they couldn't afford it. And so when at church, even caregivers, this is something, Carson actually has an adult buddy that is a member of our church, and she has been his adult buddy since middle school and high school, and she will bring him to and from his life group. He sits with their life group. All of these things, that was valuable to us, and we know that's valuable when someone from the church is saying, I'm going to sit with your loved one so that you don't even have to think about what it is, just relaxing in the presence of God, all of these things without going, do they need to go to the bathroom, they need to do this or this. And so that was important to have someone maybe at the church that you say, I will sit with your person, or I will bring them to and from their life group. Maybe they're depending on where they are in the progress.
Another suggestion from caregivers was about their desire for others to allow open and honest conversations, to be able to honestly share how they're doing. And there not be some sort of judgment or response that comes back, because again, caregiving is a hard job, and there are gonna be days, there were many days where I lost my temper, I flew off the handle, I did not handle situations well, and I had to I had to confess it. I had to repent from it and trust in the grace of God as I move forward in it. Caregiving is not for
Cowards.
cowards. Yeah, caregiving is not for cowards. That's a good way to put it. And it's a difficult job, and we're not always going to handle it well. And your role as the one that cares for the caregiver can be to love them through those moments when they don't handle it well.
Someone had mentioned about, again, they're rushing us, for crying out loud, they're rushing us. Just mentioned about how caregiving can impact the family members. We didn't even realize how much our oldest son was grieving just the fact that his conversations with his grandpa were slowly coming to an end because they were very close. But what it has done is it's actually trained him and prepared him. He's actually a caretaker for one of his college students who's in a wheelchair, and he helps his parents by doing that. We could never teach that, but that's something, because again, he was impacted by the way other people cared for us as well. And so I think the point that we're just trying to make is that up front and just you can make a difference with the caregiver because you're reminding them that they still exist as well. They have something more than just caring for that person, but that they're hurting and they're trying to make sense of it, but they just don't always know where to turn.
And one of the blessings of being a part of McGregor, and I know not all of you are part of our church, but our church has a Stevens ministry, which provides a person matched up to a caregiver so that they can have that kind of relationship where that it is an encouraging thing, and they can speak openly and honestly about that. Now, if you're from a different church other than McGregor and they don't have a sensitivity towards people that are walking down the dementia journey, or they don't have a ministry for those who are caregiving. My encouragement to you, and I've been a pastor for a long time, since I was 18 years old. That was a long time ago. But if you're part of a church that doesn't pay attention to those with dementia or those that are caring for dementia, my encouragement would be to be a respectful advocate for that to come about in your church. That's how it happened in this church. Yeah. Yep. Someone had a conviction, and Kim Mitchell was respectful in advocating that we begin a ministry for that particular. She wasn't angry or mad or ticked off or complaining all the time. She was a respectful advocate. I think that's a very, very helpful thing and a way to approach it when you've got, because almost every congregation has folks on this journey. Yeah. And so it is a need. And so to be a respectful advocate would be my encouragement.
And we wish we had more time. I know there's so much more we could say, we could provide, and we wanted to allow time for questions, but wow, they are staying right on track. So I guess you can
We're ahead of schedule.
I know, you can always email, I guess, the email address for Alzheimer's Ministry. But,
yeah, let me make note of one of the all the resources.
Yep.
Dr. Mast's book, Second Forgetting, is incredible if you haven't read it yet. So is Dr. Shaw's workbook, Dementia Workbook. One of the ones that I would encourage you to look at on the bottom of your sheet there is Side by Side, Walking with Wisdom and Love with Other People. Yeah. So that's a small book, big fan of small books. I love small books. Yep. So I think that's about 80, it's less than 100 pages. And it really is a great practical book on how to employ wisdom and love in relationship that you would have being the one caring for the caregiver. So I don't get any kickbacks for this book being bought.
He gets a kickback though. I am an author of 2 books.
Yes.
And honestly, one was dedicated to Troy, the second one, Nameless But Known, that came out just shortly after he passed away, and that book's dedicated to him. The other one I read to him most of the time of the ending of his life, Odd Mom's Out, just to read him stories of the scriptures. And so sometimes that was the way that we took these books and we just would read to him, even if he couldn't say a whole lot because it's told scripture. So those are always available as well. They're not about dementia, but they are little Bible studies for women that we have talked about.
And I'm going to crack the door, and if nobody else has gone out in the fellowship hall, we're going to take questions.
We'll do quick questions, yeah.
Phooey.
Thank you all for being
Thank y'all so much for being with us. We can. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. And if this episode encouraged you to better support caregivers, please subscribe and consider sharing it with your church or community.